If you've ever wanted to play an archer who has more off-turn techniques and abilities than any other character in any TTRPG that I've ever seen, as well as having the ability to assist your allies and buff them, then you'd want to play a bard in Final Fantasy XIV Tabletop RPG. My name is Coleman Webb, and this is Limit Break 20, and today we're going to be doing our job guide review of the bard. So if you've played other tabletop RPGs such as Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, you're going to find that the bard is going to work very differently in Final Fantasy XIV than it does in your current TTRPG system. So let's just go ahead and dive into it. Let's start with their primary attributes. The bard has a strength of +1, a dexterity of +4, a vitality of +2, an intelligence of +3, and a mind of +2. Their secondary attributes consist of a defense of 13, a magic defense of 13, a vigilance of 12, and like all other characters, they have a speed of 5 squares. Their MP is a max at 5 like every other character, and their HP is a max at 24. So what we want to do is dive into their traits and other effects. And one of their primary traits is called Arrow Volley. And on your turn, after resolving the effect of an ability that enables this trait, you may use an additional volley ability. You may choose a new target when using this additional ability. Arrow Volley can only be used once per turn. Next, we're going to look at Bard Song. While under the effects of a Bard Song enchantment, all allies benefit from its effects. Bard Song enchantments are removed at the end of your next turn or when you are granted a new Bard Song enchantment. Oh, enhancement. Yeah, reading that wrong. Dyslexia finally kicked in. Next is the Bard Song Mage's Ballad. While under the effects of a Bard Song Mage's Ballad, all allies may each re-roll a single die when determining the amount of damage dealt by an ability. Any die re-rolled in this way cannot be re-rolled again, and its results must be used. So what's going to be really important and maybe different than if you've played a bard in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition is that the Bard Song is going to impact all player characters, not just one, and the players have until the end of your next turn to use that ability. So they want to make sure that they aren't necessarily trying to hoard this resource or save it for a single specific esoteric event. You're going to want to make sure they're using this. Next, we'll dive into their primary abilities. Their first primary ability is called Heavy Shot. This is a single target attack with a range of 10 squares, and bards are going to be using their dexterity modifier added to their d20 rolls, and it's going to target the enemy's defenses. The base effect is that it's going to deal 2 damage to the target, and this is going to enable Arrow Volley. Now remember, Arrow Volley allows you to use another technique that has the Arrow Volley title on your turn, once per turn. If the die rolled for this ability check lands on a 15 or higher, the following proc effect triggers. Heavier Shot, grant straight shot ready. So we'll look at this next ability, but this is going to be important, so I want you guys to just remember this. We'll come back to it. Now, if the bard gets a direct hit with this ability, it deals an additional 1d6 worth of damage. Next, we're going to look at straight shot ready. So what you'll see is that this requirement is you have to be under the effect of straight shot ready. And as you can see, it's a single target, 10 squares, dexterity checks the same. It's going to target the enemy's defenses. And what this does is this deals 3 damage to the target and enables Arrow Volley. A direct hit deals an additional 2d6 worth of damage. So this is really, really important because if you are a bard and you cast Heavy Shot on your first opening turn, what's going to happen is that you roll that 15 on the dice, you're going to be able to immediately use straight shot because it is a volley technique, okay? So we'll keep that in mind because there's a few different ways that these interact with Arrow Volley, so we'll kind of move into the next one. So the next technique that we're going to look at is called Venomous Bite and Wind Bite. Single target, range is 10 squares, dexterity check is what you're using on your d20 roll. And it's going to target the enemy's defenses. Now, this is going to inflict a damage over time on the target, and it's going to enable arrow volley. So, direct hit is going to deal 2 damage to the target. So, again, another damage over time ability, which is really awesome if you can get this off, early in combat. The final technique that we're going to look at for their primary ability is called Quick Knock. This is going to target all enemies within range, and this is a 3x3 area adjacent to this character. Dexterity is what you're going to use for the d20 roll, and you're targeting the enemy's defenses. The base effect is that's going to do 2 damage to all targets in this 3x3 square, and if you get a direct hit, it's going to deal an additional 1d6 worth of damage. So now that we got the primary abilities out of the way, I want to show you how some of these things can interact. So if you do not have straight shot ready, because remember, you only get that is if you use heavy shot and roll a 15 or higher on the d20 roll. So let's say you open up with Venomous Bite and you hit who you think's the biggest baddest enemy, putting a damage over time on them. What's going to happen is that's going to enable your arrow volley. So let's just say then you say, well, the only ability I have or volley that I can use on this turn is heavy shot. So then you use heavy shot, you score a 15 on that damage roll. Well, now you've got straight shot ready, but you can't use it because you can only use 2 of those volley techniques at most on your turn. So round 2 of combat comes in. Now what you can do is use straight shot since it's readied, and then you could move into heavy shot because remember, straight shot also enables arrow volley. So, and you'll see this kind of play into the Bard as they level up. That's beyond the scope of this video. But as you can see, they have the ability to, because of that arrow volley, to use different techniques. But generally no more than 2 per turn, depending on what you need. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into their secondary abilities. The first ability that they have is called Raging Strikes. And what this does is it makes all your primary abilities deal an additional 2 damage until the end of this turn. And the limitation is twice per phase. So kind of similar to the Dragoon's ability where you can just add damage until the end of this turn. Pretty awesome. Next is going to be Mage's Ballad. This is a single target within 10 squares, and this deals 2 damage to the targets and grants the Bard song Mage's Ballad. And this restores 1 use of Bloodletter as well, which is an instant ability that we'll go over, and its limitation is once per phase. So one real quick note on Mage's Ballad. As you can see, there is a target on there that says single. And what I believe that this means, or this is how I would interpret it, is that in order to cast Mage Ballad on an ally has to be within 10 squares of you. So if you're split up, you can't be casting it. Now, if you go back to that traits and other effects, it says Bard Song. While under the effects of a Bard Song enchantment, all allies benefit from its effects. So as long as someone is able to sort of be within that 10 square radius, then all the allies will still be able to use that. At least that's how I'm looking at it. If you think of something different, feel free to leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts. So before we go into instant abilities, I want to just take a quick note of the Bard itself. And one of the things that I think is really cool about this character is that of all the abilities that they have, primary, secondary, and instant, they get the most instant abilities. And not only do they get the most instant abilities, it's the most instant abilities of any character out there, at least so far in the released free materials and starter guide. So let's go ahead and dive into these abilities. So the first one that we're going to see is Leg Graze. And this is triggers immediately after an enemy makes an ability check, and the target is the enemy that's obviously making that ability. Range is 10 squares, and the base effect is that this reduces the ability check that triggered by 1d6, and its limitation is once per phase. So this is awesome. So enemy goes to attack your warrior. He gets a let's call it a 16, right? And maybe their defense is 15. You could use leg graze, and maybe they roll that d6. It goes down by 2 or 3. Or it'd have to be 3. Yeah, 2, 16. That's how math works. It goes down by 2, and then that attack misses, and it saves some damage that your tank would otherwise be taking. So pretty cool. Next is going to be Second Wind. When basically, and this triggers when any character finishes their turn, and it's going to restore 1d6 plus 2 HP, and this limitation is once per phase. So this is a really nice quick heal option if you happen to get caught in an AOE technique, or you just happen to be the target of the enemy that doesn't have enmity, right? A nice way to heal yourself and take some pressure off your healer. Next, we're going to take a look at is Foot Graze, and the trigger for this is immediately before an enemy moves, and the target's obviously the enemy that triggered this ability, and this has to be within 10 squares of you. Basically, the check that you're going to make is a dexterity check, and you're going to target the enemy's defense. This doesn't have any base effect, so this is one of the only ability that I've seen so far in all the characters where you use this and there's no base effect, so you've actually got to hit them with it. But if you do hit them, this inflicts bind on the target until the end of this turn. And this limitation is once per phase. Now, what we'll do is let's review the bind enfeeblement. While bound, small and medium character speeds fall to 0, while large creature speed are reduced by 2. Characters receive 1 advantage dice when making ability checks targeting a bound character, right? So this would be something to keep in mind, because the inflicting bind on this target until the end of this turn. So usually that would happen is we're in the enemy step, the enemy moves, you see them moving, you want to lock them down, you hit them with Foot Graze. Well, if any one of your spell casters, I think it would be probably the most appropriate, has a instant cast available, that might be a good time to trigger it, because what happens is they're bound, they would get advantage on whatever attack roll. So you might be able to have the Black Mage use instant cast and get advantage on that and maybe nuke that character, which I think is pretty cool. So next, we're going to look at Blood Letter, and this is a cool one. I think this is one of my favorite instant abilities in the game so far. The trigger is when any character finishes their turn. And again, this is your allies, this is enemies, this is whenever a character finishes their turn. Single target, range of 10 squares, and this just deals 4 damage to the target. It's just this kind of a nice, heavy hit right from the gate that you can use. Pretty awesome. And the limitation is twice per phase. Now, one thing I want to talk about with Blood Letter is that this intertwines with Mage's Ballad. So, for example, if you haven't used Blood Letter yet, you generally wouldn't want to use Mage Ballad, mainly because Mage Ballad is going to restore 1 use of your Blood Letter. So you could technically get 3 uses of this ability per phase, depending on how you structure it. So depending on your turn order, it might be nice to get one of these Blood Letters off right from the gate, and then especially if you're going to cast Mage Ballad on your turn, just kind of optimizing damage there. So next, we're going to take a look at is Repelling Shot, and the trigger on this is when any character finishes their turn, so love that. Single target, range is 10 squares, and the base effect is that you move up to 3 squares, and you cannot end this movement in a square that is closer to the target than where you began. So limitations once per phase. And then the next one we're going to look at is Head Graze, and this one's pretty powerful. So the trigger is when an enemy within 10 squares of this character uses an invoked ability, so think of these as those AoE type moves that are going to hit everybody at the beginning of the next enemy step, or using an invoked ability to generate a marker. Well, I think it kind of spoiled that one. But basically, target is the enemy that triggered this ability, and the range is 10 squares. The base effect is that it interrupts the invoked ability that triggered Head Graze, negating it completely. So you get the boss that's going to hit everybody in the area, right? This thing's got a 15-foot radius. I mean, that might be like a hard Titan fight from a video game, right? You just know you're going to get hit, you're going to have to deal with it. But this will completely negate that. just once per phase. So really good to coordinate with your tank and maybe other party members who have some similar abilities. So that way you guys aren't all piling on resources. You can save them for different rounds of combat. So, but that's it for the instant abilities. So their limit break is called Sagittarius Arrow. The trigger is anytime, like all limit breaks, and the target is all enemies within range. And the range is a 5 by X area, so an area extending a straight line from one square adjacent to this character. So think of 5 squares directly in front of you, and this is going to deal 66 damage divided evenly, rounded up, because that's how math works, against all targets, and it inflicts a DOT of 4 on all targets. So this is pretty cool. So this is a way that you could, put out damage, move yourself into a position to where you can line this up and hit multiple enemies and have an additional damage over time in addition to venomous bite and wind bite. So that's basically all the information that you need to know about the Bard. A couple of different things that I would sort of notate, and especially if you're a game master playing with a Bard, there's a few things that I would just keep in mind. One is that their venomous bite and wind bite, that doesn't have any specifications that you can only cast this damage over time once. I believe in most every other character sheet that they do say something like, for example, I know the Black Mage has some condition to where they can't keep stacking this ability. So I don't know if that's intentional or not, but I don't know. I'm kind of torn about this. If someone let someone keep stacking that damage over time, I might play through it and see if that just totally wrecked my boss fight. And then if it did, maybe rule against that going forward. But something to know there. But as you can see, what I love about the Bard is I think it's the character that can be the most engaged in combat and almost acts as sort of that battlefield tactician, right? You can be hitting people with a bloodletter. You can be freezing people in place and binding them. You can be completely negating, invoked abilities, which is awesome. So there is so much utility, and I also like characters that get something special when they roll something on a dice, right? So 25% of the time you're going to be landing that heavier shot. Hopefully the dice are with you, and that you are getting that shot off more often than not. So really great. I think it's different than a Bard. If you're expecting a Bard from D&D, this is not it. I think there's some similarities with the Mage Song ballads, and I think as the character levels up, you'll see more of that. But this is really someone who wants to be taking multiple turns, doing things on enemies' turn, doing things on other players' turns, and someone that really wants to be involved in the game sort of at all times. So that's what we had for today. So hopefully you enjoyed this job class guide for the Bard. That actually does it for all the job classes that are currently out. We're about 1 month away from the full release of the rules plus shipping. So that'll be, I'm sure, like 4 weeks or something like that, knowing Square Enix. But sorry, Square Enix, but we know how this goes. Yeah, so this is exciting. We'll find some different, I got some different ideas for content I'll be putting out in the next month as well. So might be a little bit different, but should be fun. So if you did like this content, feel free to attune to this channel by liking and subscribing. And until next time, stay safe, adventurers.